All right, so let's get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining me this morning to discuss the trends we're seeing in the nonprofit sector. At Cerini and Associates, I think we take our role of working with the nonprofit sector super seriously. We make sure that we stay abreast of what's going on, all the changes happening in the sector, whether it's accounting, tax, regulatory, reimbursement, or just your operations and how you can improve them. We stalk government websites, especially the auditors' websites, to gain an understanding of what's going on there. We're looking to see what they're looking at so we can kind of share that with you and keep you guys safe. We talk to nonprofit industry leaders, such as what's happening within this trend report, to understand what they're seeing and where they believe the risks are so we can kind of help keep everybody informed. We believe in the importance of a strong and vibrant nonprofit sector. I know we all do. And in order to kind of accomplish that, we all need to stick together. We need to find ways to collaborate and work together. It's always great to try to bring nonprofit leadership together. Unfortunately, like I said, we don't have an opportunity to talk to each other today. So please use the chat section of this to kind of talk to each other, to share ideas, to provide information. The more that we can kind of get that discussion going, I will try to pull some of that into what we're talking about today. 2023, I think for everybody was an interesting year. I think it turned out a lot better than we all expected. When we went into 2023, we didn't know what was going to happen with the economy. We thought maybe there was going to be a recession, and fiscally, fundraising was up. The recession didn't really happen. Inflation started to come under control a little bit. Interest rates continued to rise in 2023. So 2023, though, at the end of the day, ended up being a lot better than we all anticipated. And now here we are 11 days into 2024. We've barely dipped our toe into the pool. But we're going to see what we can do in terms of trying to figure out where we think the world is going in 2024. I think if we look at 2024, I think, and looking at the trends, I think you need to look at the big three. The economy and where the economy is going and what's happening with the economy. Technology is going to continue to expand and have a big impact overall on the nonprofit sector, actually on the world. And then the whole issue with, staffing and staffing patterns and HR and how do we attract and retain staff. I think those are like the big three issues that we've been grappling with for the past couple of years. And I don't know that those issues are going to change. I think those are going to be our big issues for 2024 also. They may be a little different in terms of what the messaging is and what we need to do with respect to it, but they're still going to be the same, I guess, big three issues that happen in 2024. So let's jump in and get started. We have an hour and a half here to go over a bunch of stuff. So as I said, when we're talking about the big three, probably the number one is going to be the economy and what's going on with the economy. So as I said, 2023, we did see a little bit of a slowdown in inflation, and we expect that slowdown to continue into 2024. 2023, we had inflation of about 3 to 4%. We're expecting that inflation level to be about 2 to 3%. That's important because that's going to drive in terms of what your raises are going to be to your staff. That's going to have an impact in terms of expenditures and costs. So really understanding where we think inflation is going to be is super important. In addition, in terms of, I know there was discussion last year about, are we going to get into a recession? Are we going to get to a point of stagflation where, we're in a situation where the economy is not growing? But last year we did have growth in the economy of a little over 2%. This year we're expecting that growth in the economy, unfortunately, to be a little bit lower than that, at about 1.5 to 2%. Some of the things that are keeping that economy moving forward in terms of growth, the federal government, I think it was 2 years ago, put in certain initiatives. One was the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which really focused on capital projects and construction projects, but it also focused on renewable energy, green, and all of those issues that are there. So I think that's going to continue to help. There's still going to be some projects moving into 2024 and beyond, and the whole aspect of creating a renewable energy sources is going to again, continue to drive the economy and continue to be an issue over the next few years. There was also another initiative creating helpful incentives to produce semiconductors. I know that has nothing to do with the nonprofit sector, but again, we're just looking at what's helping to drive the economy. It's affectionately known as CHIPS. And what that's doing is it's helping to drive US fabrication plants. There were shortages, and we realized that we can't just rely on overseas in order to get the chips and technology we need here. So there's been an incentive to try to build here in the United States. So again, those I think are going to kind of help. If you think about Long Island has always had a skilled workforce and a higher level of technology. So the goal is to try to pull some of that stuff, into the United States. Unemployment is expected to go up to about 4.4%. Somebody just asked the question, if inflation is going down, why are we seeing an uptick in unemployment? I will talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes, because there are several factors that are leading to that, and we will get a little bit more into what's driving the unemployment. We already are seeing discussion about layoffs. Some large companies are letting people go, and again, we will have that discussion. Interest rates are intended to peak, or anticipated, I'm sorry, to peak sometime this year, and then they should start going on a decline. Don't expect them to get down to those rates of 1, 2, 3%. I think right now the mortgage rates are somewhere in the 8 to 9%. Maybe you see 2% drop off that rate. Maybe you see it, it comes down a little bit. But we're not going to see the pre-pandemic interest rates for a while. You're not going to see them in 2024. Money is going to continue to be somewhat expensive as we get through 2024. Do expect banks to take a more conservative approach to lending, restricting credit to lower quality borrowers. They're going to be looking for greater levels of collateral. So that's something. It's going to be harder to borrow money. It's going to be less expensive than it's been the last couple of years, but it's going to be harder to get. And then the presidential election will hamper economic growth as people await the outcome. There's different policy implications that come into play when there's a presidential election, especially when you're looking at who the potential candidates may be. We may be looking at a redo of 2020. And if we are looking at a redo of 2020, there could be a high level of polarization that takes place, so that things will be a little bit charged. I mean, I think that's probably one of the factors that's leading to the increased unemployment, is that everybody's sitting in a wait and see uncertainty position. From a stock market perspective, the market did well last year. I mean, the S&P 500 was up about a little over 24% in 2023. And we all know that as the stock market goes, so goes contributions. When the stock market was down in 2022, contributions were down. In 2023, we saw an uptick in contributions, and the stock market was up. I mean, wish we would have seen a 24.2% increase in contributions. That didn't happen, but again, when the market goes up, we tend to see a little bit lightening or opening of the purse strings in terms of contributions. Over the next 12 months, 2024, we do expect the S&P 500 to grow again. The estimate is somewhere around 10%. So we do expect there to be an increase in the stock market. There's a whole lot of geopolitical concerns which do impact the U.S. economy. You have territorial conflicts still happening. You have issues in Europe. You have issues in the Gaza. You have critical elections. This is going to be one of the biggest election years internationally that has ever happened, with over 60 countries having major elections in the current year. About half the population of the world is going to be impacted by elections this year. So depending on how some of that winds up, there could be some potential fracture points. And if that happens, there could be another disruption of the economy. So again, I think a lot of the issues that we're seeing in today's economy are all because there's a lot of uncertainty that exists within the marketplace, and people are waiting to see what happens with some of this uncertainty that's out there. I think one of the other factors, and you can see here, according to a survey done by Resume Builders, 40% of companies are anticipating layoffs in 2024. So that's really what's going to drive that unemployment rate up from 3.7% to 4.4%. Biggest industries that we see are potentially going to be impacted are construction, software, in which we've already started seeing layoffs in the software industry, information, retail, finance, and insurance. That's been an area that there's been some shortages in the past, but we're actually seeing some of the larger accounting firms starting to lay off individuals specifically or especially in the consulting industries, education, and healthcare and social assistance. So there is going to be, some layoffs within the marketplace that could be an opportunity for you guys in the nonprofit sector. I know there's been a lot of concerns that there's not enough staff out there, so this could actually free up some staff and hopefully help out. As I said, I would get into the factors of why unemployment is going up. I think there are three major factors that are kind of contributing to this. The first one is probably AI. There's a study that Goldman Sachs did, and they found that generative AI tools over the next decade could impact over 300 million full-time jobs worldwide. So what's happening is we're seeing more and more in terms of utilizing generative AI to produce results that normally would have been done by people. So you'll see some level of layoffs happening because of that. As I said earlier, also the uncertainty. You got the war in Ukraine. You got the the Palestinian conflict that's happening in the Gaza, and then you have again all of these elections that are taking place, not just worldwide but also here domestically. And then lastly, the cost of capital. The cost of capital has been up. People don't want the additional 8, 9, 10% cost of capital in terms of building. So there's been a slowdown in some of that building and construction that has been there in the past when money was cheap. As the cost of money comes down and construction happens more, we should see hopefully some rebuilding of the economy in terms of jobs. Some of the big names that have already announced cuts, and again, I know these are not in the nonprofit sector, but Nike has talked about a $2 billion cutback over the next 3 years. Hasbro is looking to cut 20% of their workforce during 2024. Charles Schwab is cutting 5 to 6%. And if you actually look it up, there's a big long laundry list of companies that are anticipating cuts. So again, we do expect that there is going to be kind of a softening of the labor market. And again, that bodes well for those of you who are out there looking for staff. Continuing along in terms of what's happening in the economy, obviously most of the people that are on this are either in or are in New York State, and some of you are also in New York City. Over the last several years, New York State has relied heavily upon federal funding. There's been a lot of CARES Act funding that's come down and helped New York State to keep their budget under control. Unfortunately, we're at a situation where that CARES Act funding is virtually over, right? It's basically gone. So now New York State has to stand on its own 2 feet. So if we look at kind of what's happening out there within New York State and New York City, New York City has already, because of the immigrant issue, they've already done a 5% cut in terms of their budgets because they needed the extra funding. There's talk that they're going to be doing a second 5% cut, so we anticipate that happening. And when you have those 5% cuts, that first batch of 5% cuts, many organizations didn't necessarily feel that first batch of 5% cuts because a lot of what happened with that 5% cut was the whole aspect of, hey, we're not going to replace positions that are open, we're not going to fill them. So there was budgetary cuts without really any significant impact on services. if they have to do a second 5% cut, there's no more of these jobs that are not filled. Now there's going to be cuts back in services. They're going to need to, pull dollars out of the system. So New York City is anticipating budget shortfalls over the next 3 years of 6%, 8%, and 9% respectively. New York State is anticipated to have a $4.3 billion budget shortfall for fiscal 2025, and that's expected to rise over the next 2 years. So we're expecting to see potentially some level of budget cuts for 24, 25. Or if not, don't expect to see increases as large as we've seen over the last couple of years. The money's not going to flow the way it has over the last couple of years, as the CARES Act money is basically gone. That means that from an organizational perspective, you really have to look at your budgets and how you're budgeting, and make sure that when you're putting together your budgets, you're kind of considering, what could potentially happen. Again, we don't know what that New York State budget's going to look like. That won't be out until sometime in April. So I would definitely consider what's going to happen there. Some of the reasons why we're seeing the problems that we're seeing in New York State, there's been declines in population, right? New York State is one of 8 states last year that actually saw a decline in the population as people have moved out. People are working more remotely. That's having a big impact on Wall Street. Wall Street is where New York State and New York City get a lot of their revenue each year in terms of, with the large bonuses and everything else. A lot of those people are no longer in New York City and in New York State. So that's definitely having a big impact on the tax dollars coming in. More and more people are relying upon, national and international workforces. So you're not relying on the New York State staff as much. And then, you have, increased spending or increased costs, I should say, that are going to happen over the next couple of years because, think about it, in 2021 and 2022, we're in a situation where we had high levels of inflation. So that high level of inflation, even though inflation is down this year will be down this year to a more manageable level of 2 to 3%, we're still building that 2 to 3% off the inflation that happened over the last couple of years. So what's going on in terms of the nonprofit sector? Well, we're still seeing from a health and welfare perspective, if there is going to be an increase in unemployment, if we are going to be going from a 3.7% to 4.4%, you're going to have an increase in unemployment. You're going to have a widening gap of the haves and have-nots, and potentially an increased demand for services. More and more people are going to need the services of the nonprofit sector in terms of health and welfare organizations. I think from arts and cultural organizations, as the economy starts to stabilize or continues to stabilize, inflation comes under control. Hopefully we'll see market conditions improve, which means then, hopefully we'll see more stabilization happening in the arts and cultural industry. Fundraising, as I mentioned before, was up in 2023, and that is anticipated to continue into 2024, again, with a strong stock market. However, when we look at the election, we look at the geopolitical concerns, a lot of the ongoing environmental issues that we're having, with respect to, earthquakes and tornadoes and, all of that stuff that's happening. Even though fundraising may be up, we may see some of that fundraising being diverted from more of the local charities to more international or some of the more charged issues that are coming up within the election. We do, as I said earlier, we do expect there to be cutbacks in government funding. So we do need to consider what's going on with respect to contingency budgets. We're in talking to a bunch of the nonprofits we work with over 300 nonprofits. In talking to a bunch of the nonprofits we work with, we're seeing that anticipated raises are going to be somewhere between 2 to 3% this upcoming year. So we're seeing that as kind of mirroring the anticipated inflation. And again, it's tough because if you think about it, over the last few years, organizations have been cutting and cutting and cutting, in terms of and there's probably not a lot more to cut. So, and you've seen an uptick in services. So it's just been a difficult marketplace. And again, I apologize, and unfortunately, I don't mean to be the bearer of you know not bad news, but news. It's just going to get a little tighter. Um, from an organizational need perspective, leadership is going to be a big issue, continue to be a big issue. It was a big issue in 23. It's going to be continue to be a big issue over the next few years. There was a survey done, and 75% of organizational leadership is anticipated to leave their positions in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's a huge turnover. We're seeing it already. A lot of our clients are reaching out to us and asking us, do you know anybody in the CFO position? Do you know anybody we're looking for a controller? We're looking for a new CEO. So there is already some of that happening within leadership positions. It really comes down to the fact that nonprofits need to do or continue to do a strong job of building up their leadership team, building up that second tier of leadership, and pushing for more leadership training and retooling the leadership that's in place. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, as we go on. I think also from a succession plan perspective, nonprofit organizations haven't necessarily done a good job up till now in terms of creating succession plans. Only 27% of nonprofits have succession plans. But the other thing to think about from a leadership perspective, I'm a baby boomer. I'm the kind of the last year of the baby boomers. And from that perspective, my learning style came from other baby boomers, and leadership style came from other baby boomers, and came from, the silent generation, which was the generation before me. And then, in terms of, who the next couple generations, the millennials, Gen X and everything, who did they learn from? They also learned from or got their leadership style from baby boomers. By the year 2025, 27% of the workforce is going to be Gen Z. And if you try to push a baby boomer leadership style onto a Gen Z workforce, it's not going to work. So again, when we're looking at that strong leadership and the need to retool that leadership, you need to kind of keep in mind that, some of the stuff that we've learned and has been effective for us as leaders in the past is not going to be effective on the next generation as we kind of move through. So it's really going to be important that, again, we retool our leadership and, we focus on, what's important to the next generation. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move through this. Another thing that organizations need to continue to do is kind of look at risk management, right? They need to get a clear understanding throughout their agency in terms of what's happening from a risk perspective. We've been encouraging our clients to put in place risk management committees and have more of an open discussion with their boards in terms of what's happening within the organizations from a risk perspective. I think risk is just continuing to rise on a regular basis. I mean, if you think about, you've got the cybersecurity threats and IT issues that are happening as we rely more and more on technology. You've got compliance related issues. Regulations are changing on a regular basis, and we need to stay on top of those regulations. How are we staying on top of all of the changes in terms of reimbursement methodology, regulations, and everything? We've got insurance exposures. When was the last time, you may have shopped your insurance policy around, but when was the last time you had somebody look at your insurance policy to make sure that all of the exposures that need to be covered are covered? You've got staffing issues. You've got the new pay parity rules that went into effect the tail end of September last year, which now requires you to be more open and transparent with pay related issues. You've got changing regulations that are happening. You've got more discussion regarding unionization and everything else that's happening out there in the marketplace. So, it's really going to be much more important for organizations to think strategically about risk and look at what are the risks within their organization and how can they mitigate some of those risks. And then, as we've talked about with the economy the way it is, and with maybe some government cutbacks that are happening, what are we doing from a budgeting and cash flow perspective? So we're looking at, uncertainty of maybe of some of the revenue streams. Are we going to get the revenue that we thought we were going to get? How is that going to impact our ability to continue to deliver service, especially if we're seeing an uptick in the service delivery needs? What's happening from cash flow perspective? What are we doing in terms of cash flow delays? Anybody who's operating in New York City or in Suffolk, we've been seeing some, cutbacks and delays in some of that stuff. Rising demand and need for service that I talked about, increased audit activity. We've been definitely seeing an increase in the level of audits that are happening out there in the marketplace. And then monitoring service provisions and grants, making sure that we understand what we need to be doing. There is something that's thrown out there. I think older Americans, the older America gets and the recognition of mental health issues, there'd be an unending demand of services and stuff like that for the mental health world. And I think, yeah, that is the case. I think that's one of the important things that we're going to be looking at when we get into some of the HR related issues, that from an HR perspective, mental health is going to continue to be a big issue, and mental well-being is going to continue to be a big issue within, the HR marketplace. Sorry, continuing to talk about the economy because the economy is such a big issue. We need to make sure that we've got good information flow, right? We need to have timely information. Information is knowledge, and information is king these days. Information is the lifeblood of nonprofit organizations. You can't make changes, you can't adapt if you don't have the proper information. So I think in 2024, we're going to see organizations investing more in their infrastructure to improve their overall information flow, because having that information flow is really going to help nonprofits to make critical decisions, and that's going to be important. We're expecting, again, more planning and strategic thinking in 2024. During the COVID years were very reactionary. Everybody had to react. New rules and regulations were being popped out on a regular basis. People were thinking totally creatively in terms of what they were going to do under the COVID era, but they weren't really thinking about where are we going 5 or 10 years from now. They were thinking creatively in terms of what do we need to do today. There was a lot of crisis management that was taking place. As we've now come out of COVID, not that COVID is no longer a thing, but it's not as big a thing, I guess. It's still going to be disruptive, but it's not as big a thing as it was. As we come out of the COVID era and we kind of go into now the post-COVID era, I think we need to get back into that whole thought of strategic thinking. Where are we as an organization? What are we doing? I think we need to reassess a whole lot of stuff that's happening, in our marketplace. If you kind of think about it, there are 3,500 nonprofits on Long Island. There are 35,000 nonprofits in New York City. The question comes down to, is every one of them truly necessary? Should there be consolidation happening within the marketplace? What direction is your organization moving in? Are all of your services necessary? Does your organization continue to be relevant, or are there things that we really need to do in order to make it relevant? Do you have the right voices and perspectives and everything in the room? So there's a lot of different things, that are going on here. So we really need to kind of rethink our operations and relevancy, reassess current programs and contracts. Are the programs that we're doing the appropriate programs? Should we be, building deeper collaborations, and maybe eliminate some of the services we're providing and team up with other organizations and kind of create linkages? We need to reassess our service delivery models. Are there better ways to deliver services? Are we really meeting the needs of the communities? Are we really having conversations with the communities we serve to understand that, what their needs are? Do we have the right, as I said before, do we have the right people and voices in the room? Are the people who are within our organization reflective of the people we serve? So what impact are we having on with respect to our current services, and there are better ways that we can do this? Are we effective? And then again, advocacy and monitoring are going to continue to be important. We need to push for more appropriate contracts. I think a lot of the contracts that are being, for lack of a better word, shoved upon us by some of the government organizations, I think there's some concerns there. We're in a situation where, when we look at this, we need to make sure that the contracts are appropriate contracts. We want to make sure that from a wage perspective, we're able to provide fair wages to individuals. And then again, DEIA is going to continue to be a big issue at all levels of an organization. And it should be because we need to make sure that, as I said before, we've got the right voices. If you don't have a good cross section of people in the room, if you don't have people coming from different walks of life, different socioeconomic areas, you're really not going to really have a good handle or pulse on the people that you're serving. So it's really important that that takes place. I know there's a little bit of discussion happening right now within the chat in terms of where most people are. We are a New York-based accounting firm that we do serve, all over the country. But I think you're going to see that the majority of the people that are part of this audience are from the New York metropolitan area. That doesn't mean that a lot of the information isn't information that's going to be germane all over the place. It's just going to be a little more, in terms of our presentation, a little more New York focused. All right, so let's move on to, I think, the second piece, some of the fundraising stuff that's happening out there. I think this still kind of goes with the economy. But I think, we look at the fundraising, because I think when we look at nonprofits and we talk to nonprofit organizations about what are the most critical issues that they're facing out there, bringing in dollars and bringing in discretionary dollars is probably one of the most important. We hear all about, boards and, how do we engage our boards more effectively as another issue. So it's, again, something that nonprofits continue to grapple with. And then it's the employment issues. So hopefully we'll be able to cover, most or all of those types of things. So from a fundraising perspective, in 2022, as I said earlier, we saw a drop in fundraising. Fundraising was contributions were down overall about 10.4% once you adjusted for inflation. In 2023, we saw an increase of about 5 to 6%. And then in 2024, we're anticipating increases again. However, again, as I mentioned before, some of that may not be local, as we're dealing with a lot of international issues and everything else. So we may see that some of those dollars move away from some of the more local areas, but we do expect there to be an uptick in contributions for the year. There is some talk about possibly IRS changing their regulations and providing tax benefit to non-itemizers. That was something that was in effect a few years back. They got rid of it in, I think it was 2023, they eliminated that. They're talking about bringing it back and bringing it back at a higher level. If they do bring back the ability for non-itemizers to take a tax deduction for contributions, that will help to spur the contribution level. So we're hoping that is something that comes into play. From a political perspective, again, if you think about that, this is going to be a charged election year. There's going to be an increase in some of the, as I said before, there's going to be more polarized, I think. There's going to be a bunch of issues that are on the table. Okay, we've got the immigration issue, we've got climate change and environmental issues, we've got abortion, we've got education and cultural wars, and how that kind of happens in terms of there's been issues down in Florida with the LGBTQ community and everything else. There's higher or discussions about crime and combating crime and everything. So you've got a lot of issues that are on the table. And I think, any of the nonprofit organizations that are out there that can connect themselves to some of these issues could be in a good place and may want to consider trying to find ways that they can kind of reach out to their constituents and reach out to their donors and discuss the fact that these are some of the global issues that are out there that we're grappling with as a country, and that this is what you do, and donations to your organization kind of will help with some of these or help to combat some of the major issues that we're dealing with right now. So again, if you are working in some of these areas or tangentially to some of these areas, this could provide a jumping point for you from a contribution perspective, because there's going to be a lot more discussion about these issues happening out there in the marketplace. These are also areas that, from a public relations perspective, you should be reaching out there and pushing information out so that you're seen as an expert in the marketplace in some of these areas as they become much more discussed over the next 12 months or 11 months, I guess it is. We're seeing a big rise in donor advised fund. It's the fastest growing vehicle for providing donations in the country, and we don't expect to see that slow down. It just makes it a whole lot easier for donors to give, because they're able to put money into a donor advised fund and then decide later which specific organizations they want to provide that funding to. So again, we're seeing an uptick in donor advised fund, and we expect that uptick to continue. Donor advised funds are at a record high. And what we're seeing is that the average payout over the last 5 years is about 25%. So what that means is, people are putting money into these donor advised funds, and about 25% of the funds that are in the donor advised funds each year are finding their way out to the nonprofit sector. Again, we would love to see that faster, which basically means that money is being held in these donor advised funds for a few years, while people are making decisions. The good part is that, you can hopefully influence some of the people who have donor advised funds to kind of push some of those dollars to you. One of the things that we're also expecting to happen, and I know I've talked about this the last couple of years, but the next 20 to 25 years, we're going to see the great wealth transfer that takes place. Over $84 trillion in assets are set to change hands over the next 20 to 25 years. 72.6 trillion of that will go on to heirs, and 11.9 trillion of that is going to be going out to charity. So my first question, or what I would ask myself, is how have we positioned ourselves to be in a position to get some of that $11.9 trillion that's going to be heading out to charities? Or even how have we positioned ourselves to do a better job of, that 72.6 that's going down to heirs? Are we positioned to be, the charity of choice to either the current generation or the next generation, or hopefully both? If we look to see where the dollars are concentrated, the silent generation, which is the individuals born between 1928 and 1945, they're holding a little over $18 trillion. Baby boomers, 1946 to 1964, that's where the lion's share of this money is, $78.29 trillion. And the baby boomers have built up their wealth because that's kind of the post-war era. They were able to buy homes. They were able to get into the stock market at lower pricing. Everything has kind of moved up, and that's where that wealth has come. And that wealth is going to start moving. Like I said, the youngest baby boomers right now are going to be turning 60 this year. So Generation X is the second biggest with about $48 trillion. Millennials are sitting on about $14.2 trillion. Then that's what I have on the chart. So that's where the money is. And I think, again, you need to ask yourself, what are we doing in terms of having that open discussion regarding planned giving with our donors? How are we tapping into, if we have some large donors that are older, what are we doing in terms of talking to their families? What are we doing in terms of making sure that when the primary donors for us, pass away, are we still going to be relevant to their families? And are we still going to be a charity of choice to their families? And if not, how are we opening up those lines of communication and starting to get to incorporate or introduce the next generation to our organizations? And then the other thing is, when we look at our millennials and we look at Gen Z, they're not necessarily the ones that have the large level of money today, but they will have money as we move forward through the next 20 to 25 years. So how are we trying to attract them and get them focused on our organization, so that when they do inherit funds, that, again, they have the resources now to start making donations to our organization, that they have the resources to, that we're top of mind to them. Some of the other fundraising trends we're seeing is AI. AI has become a significant tool for fundraising within the nonprofit sector. There are 8 significant places that we're seeing AI being used within the fundraising arena. I'll touch on a couple of them. I mean, content generation. You can use AI to provide personalized donor email outreach. You can use it to create infographic ideas, social media post ideas, and scheduling. You can use it to personalize direct mail campaigns, blog posting, writing articles. We use it all the time as a firm to kind of take a first pass in terms of some of the articles that we write and everything else. So if you're trying to do a campaign and you want to direct your donor communication, you can use AI to direct some of that donor communication. Prospect identification. So you use, prospect identification kind of deals with pinpointing potential donors who exhibit certain characteristics that could make them a significant donor to your organization. So you can identify major donors, donors likely to upgrade their giving to you, maybe even potential legacy or planned giving donors, by kind of understanding what people are looking at, by understanding what individuals are doing from a search perspective, and aligning your communication to them to what's of interest to them. It can help to garner new donors to your organization. Third, action recommendations. It kind of helps you to not just analyze information, so you can use AI to not just analyze the information that's there, but also to recommend next steps. What do I do next? Okay, good. I've been able to capture a lot of this information, but now what do I do with this information? What are my next steps? How do I reach out to my potential donors? And AI has been useful in that. Business simulation. You can use AI to identify some of the changes that maybe you need to be making within your fundraising model, some of the changes you need to even be making in staffing patterns and everything else, and help you to kind of align your resources that you have within the organization, and where to put those resources. You can use it to kind of look at what's happening from a social media perspective. Am I using my dollars and staff most effectively? Automating some of the marketing. You can target potential donors, audiences, and really understand their preferred channels. We'll talk about some of the different channels that are out there in terms of ways that you can reach out to your donors. But this can also help you using AI to understand how those channels are working, where's the best ways to reach out to some of your donors, what are they looking at, and how they're using these channels. The perception of the constituents. You can gather audience feelings about your organization and turn it into data-driven next steps. So if you can really understand what your constituents feel by doing surveys and understanding the how they feel about the services you're providing, the impact that you're having, and everything else, you'd be in a better position then to understand next steps and how to reach out to them. Again, donor journey mapping is kind of similar to that. One of the things you see is that about 71% of all donors expect some sort of personalized experience, when they make a donation to your organization. Unfortunately, about 76% of all donors who do make donations to organizations are frustrated because they don't receive what they wanted from nonprofit organizations, which is why a lot of nonprofits maybe can get that first donation, but they don't typically get that second donation from a donor, because there's this kind of disconnect between what a donor's perception is and what a nonprofit does. So I think one of the things that we can use AI for is to hyper personalize supporter communication by understanding how they came to the organization, what did they look at on your website, what fundraising events did they come to, all of those things. And by understanding all of those things, you can then try to start to understand, again, as I said before, what's important to them and help you to better communicate with them so that they feel that the experience is more of a personalized experience. And then the last part is the simple task automation. You can use AI to kind of do simple sorts of things, summarizing meeting notes, organizing and cleaning up data, debugging code, developing reusable templates and outlines, organizing files, all of those things that happen within the fundraising department, and can be done. In terms of, where nonprofit organizations can look to access AI tools, there's a lot of different AI tools out there. You've got so many of them. The one that everybody hears about these days is ChatGPT, but there's a lot of different AI tools. What we can do is when we send out the information or we send out a copy of the recording of this webinar, what we'll also do is we'll try to get you guys out some information about some of the different AI tools that are out there. Some of the other things we're seeing out there in the fundraising world, there used to be that old 80-20 rule. 80% of donations come from 20% of donors. We're seeing a widening of the gap where it's now 90% of donations are coming from 10% of the donors. There's a lot more bigger donations coming in. Donations, if you think about it, overall in 2023, donations were up overall, but the number of people who donated was down. So it just means that people are giving more meaningful donations, and there's a lot less people giving. Last year, less than 50% of all people gave to nonprofit organizations. If you go back to the year 2000, that was closer to 70%. So we are seeing a decline in the number of people who are giving donations to charity. We're just seeing a kind of an uptick in the size of some of those dollars, which means that we need to continue to nurture our major donors because they're the ones who are going to make the biggest difference. And while we're doing that, we still need to cultivate and get a broader base of donors because some of those smaller donors could be bigger donors down the road. And then the other thing is, 64% of all donations come from individuals. And you can kind of see here the breakout of where that donations come from. So 64% come from individuals, about 21% come from foundations. That's a big uptick over the last few years. Foundations were not this significant 10 years ago. So foundations have really, they're one of the bigger, faster growing areas within the donation world. It used to be individuals were over 70%, foundations were under 10. But that's becoming a bigger component now in terms of foundations. Bequests are about 9%. We do expect, as I said, with the graying of America and the big wealth transference that's going to happen, we do expect that bequest section to get bigger. And then corporations account for about 6%. I know we've talked about this in the past, and I'm a big proponent of trying to create a two-way street within the corporate world to try to get larger donations or more involvement with corporations by creating partnerships. One size clearly does not fit all. We need to find ways that we can kind of work more effectively with our corporate partners. So from some of the other trends that we're seeing, we have digital philanthropy. World is becoming much more interconnected. We're seeing a lot more use of the internet that really is driving the fundraising results. We're seeing crowdfunding platforms pop up. We're seeing much more transparency because of blockchain and everything else. People want to know where their money is going. And they want to understand what the impact that their donations are having. Some of the really cool stuff we're seeing out there, and I don't know whether you guys can do this, but I think it's really cool. Some of the organizations out there that we're seeing are now starting to create virtual reality experience that allow donors to witness the impact of their contributions firsthand. So they're able to kind of not just see a video or hear about it in a story or see pictures. They're actually nonprofits are creating virtual reality experiences where they can actually kind of live through or feel the impact. Again, nonprofit organizations that are using any sort of payment apps are going to do much better. Donations are about 1.5 times more when nonprofit organizations offer digital wallet payment options such as Venmo, PayPal, Apple Pay, Google Pay, and stuff. 26% of iPhone owning donors gave with Apple Pay. So you can see giving preference, and you can see right there that orange bar, 63% of people want to give online, debit or credit. PayPal is about 10%, direct mail is about 16%, but that direct mail is really the older population. 5% are wire transfers, 4% in cash, and 2% in mobile. So it's really that online, and the more ability you give people to give online, the greater opportunity you have to bring in those donations. I said that I would talk a little bit more about some of the channels that exist out there. So here we go, some of the social media statistics. There are 4 main channels that we see out there. You've got Facebook. Nonprofits are utilizing Facebook a lot. You're looking at the average number of nonprofits post a week, about 7.4 times a week. But you can see that the engagement rate on Facebook is pretty low. You've only got a 0.07% engagement rate. When you look at things from an engagement perspective, nonprofits are posting the least to TikTok. They're only posting about 1.45 times a week, but that's the largest level of engagement that exists out there. There's an engagement level of 7.36%. Because of the fact that TikTok is, again, video based and stuff. So that's where we're seeing the largest level of engagement. TikTok continues to be an area that's growing. Nonprofits are posting about 10 times a week on X, but again, that's probably your lowest level of engagement. So anytime you're dealing with, especially with the younger generations, anytime you're posting videos or pictures and stuff, those are going to have a much higher level of engagement than posting words and stuff. So you can see on the bottom, 55% of individuals who engage with nonprofits on social media take action, and 59% of them donate money. So you want to get that engagement within social media because you've got a higher chance of bringing in dollars when you do. 29% of online donors say that social media is the communication tool that most inspires them to give. Emails were second at 27%, website 18%, print ad 12%, or print, not ad, but print material 12%, and TV about 6%. And then 71% of nonprofits worldwide agree that social media is effective for online fundraising. And then finally, social media drives 57% of the traffic to fundraising campaign pages. So again, if you don't have a good social media platform and you are doing heavy fundraising, that's going to be something that's going to be important, because that's really what's going to help drive social media results. How do you know what the right social media is for you as an organization? Facebook has about 3 billion users. It's the most significant social media platform out there. Has been shown to be one of the most effective tools in driving traffic to campaigns. I think you got a broader base of people using Facebook. So you are getting a good cross section of all of the generations out there. Primary demographic on Facebook is 25 to 35. You're losing a lot of the Gen Z users on a daily basis. Gen Z is not necessarily using Facebook the way the other generations are. Instagram appeals to a younger crowd. 62% of the people using Instagram are 18 to 34 years old. There's about a 50-50 split between male and female users. Female have historically been more philanthropic than males. Most of the donations coming in, this says 60.7, but I believe it's even higher than that. Twitter, you're limited to 280 characters, so it's good for like quick updates. Again, with Elon Musk, taking that over last year, we'll see how that goes. And it says Twitter here, but it's actually X now. LinkedIn, geared towards business professionals. The sweet spot is 46 to 55-year-olds. It's good for identifying collaboration business partnerships. The one thing you do find, though, about LinkedIn is that people don't go on to LinkedIn as often as they go on to some of the other social media sites. And then TikTok, majority of the, or not majority, but 25% of the users are under 20. It does allow you to create quick videos and share. I think it's a great tool to kind of show your impact. It's a great tool. And again, as Judy so aptly pointed out, make sure that if you are doing videos and photos that you get permission from the people who are in the videos. But if you do have the ability in terms of kind of using TikTok to tell your story and give little snippets in terms of how you're making a difference and how you're being effective out there in the marketplace. Kind of following through on fundraising, use videos. 10% of millennials prefer to watch videos. Adding videos to your social media can generate a 12,000% increase in shares. More people are going to be willing to share, and that's part of what you're looking for. Is you really want to, and you can use videos well to evoke emotion and everything else, but you really want those shares because you want to really broaden the base of who's seeing you and who knows about you. Adding videos to email blasts can increase click-through rates by 200%. Again, you add the video, you have the ability for people to make a donation right then and there. If you can touch them, you can get those donations. Consider AI. We talked about all the reasons why AI is super important within the fundraising area, so I'm not going to go deeper into that. Social responsibility is important to, and this goes back to those corporate partnerships. 2/3 of all large American corporations believe that using philanthropy can to advance business goals, or can advance business goals, and they look at that as a total priority of the organization. It's mutually beneficial to both the nonprofit organization because you're able to bring in money, volunteers, resources, and it's beneficial to the organizations because they're able to communicate the stuff they're doing from a nonprofit perspective. They're able to get their staff involved. And to be honest with you, customers want to work with socially responsive organizations and companies, and employees want to work for companies that are making a difference in the communities that they work in. You want to make sure that there's good alignment of values and open communication. Average donor is 64 years old. Donors make an average of 2 contributions per year. And as I said before, 67%, I said before it was a little over 60, but it's 67% of all females. Donations come from females, I'm sorry, and about 32% come from males. Females tend to be more social media driven. So if you're looking to reach females, it's going to be through social media. Males tend to be more email driven in terms of that. All right, we'll move on to some of the tech trends. Some of the things that we're kind of seeing out there is workflow automation. Again, with the difficulty in finding staff in the nonprofit sector, nonprofits are looking for ways that they can automate some of the workflow, ways that they can integrate software systems so that software systems are communicating with each other and they're eliminating some of the manual processes. So anytime that we can kind of go out there and eliminate manual processes, create ways that we can automate stuff where technology is doing some of the work, it reduces the time needed, it reduces error. So that's one of the things that we're seeing, and we expect to continue to see at all levels within organizations, finding ways to use technology to improve things. That's going to happen at the programmatic level, where organizations are going to start to use, or going to continue to use technology more effectively to deliver service, to monitor, and everything else. It's going to happen at the back office level, the finance level, with some of the tools that are out there in terms of uh, AP automation, credit card processing and following, and all of those things. There's so many cool things you can do now. I'm an accountant, so I find accounting things really cool. But so many cool things you can do right now from an accounting perspective in terms of streamlining operations and having better controls in place through automation. Fundraising, we talked about, through AI and automated learning and everything else. There's going to be so many ways that we can use technology to create better workflow automation. Virtual and augmented reality, we're seeing that as a rising use in nonprofits for donor and volunteer engagement. We're also seeing it in terms of some of the treatment modalities that are happening out there, in some of the areas. We've seen some effective use here on Long Island with organizations that are using, virtual reality to work with the IDD population in terms of having them experience stuff before they actually, in virtually experience stuff before they experience it in real life. So some really cool stuff that's happening. With VR, you can showcase your impact. Uh, Augmented reality offers real-time insights. You can kind of provide some real good information there. It's a cost-effective way of training and education and everything else. Data integration, again, making sure that we've got good data. It's crucial for effective impact measurement. How do we know how impactful we are? How do we know what we should change? How do we know if we're relevant, as I was talking about before, where we have to kind of continue to reassess who we are as an organization on a regular basis. We can't do that unless we have data, and we can't do that unless we have data that's usable and integratable and everything else. Cybersecurity is going to continue to be a big issue as we move into 2024 and beyond. Here we are, 11 days into 2024, and the growing threat and the need for more robust cybersecurity measures has never been at a higher level. Based upon a study that just came out, there's one attack every 39 seconds. So, your information, your systems and everything are constantly at risk. They're constantly being looked at by people who want to take advantage of your organizations. We've seen an uptick in nonprofit organizations in terms of cyber crimes, and that's just going to continue. Nonprofits historically in the past have been a little bit behind the times in technology. That's improved over the last 5 years, but it's still in some respects easier pickings, even if it's not as big a number as some of the other cyber crimes. It's a good place to, nonprofit sector is a good place to hit. So just keep in mind that there are going to be increased demands, and as you move more and more into technology and you use technology more, you're going to see more or provide more opportunities for these cyber threats to occur. So again, AI poses challenges with sophisticated cyber threats. You've got to make sure you put in place next generation firewalls, end-to-end encryption. There should be multifaceted authorization and everything else. AI-driven threat prevention is crucial. You need to do regular security training. One of the things that we still see is nonprofit organizations are not really doing enough in terms of regular staff awareness and training of phishing and everything else. We've talked about AI a couple times, but since we're talking about tech, we'll talk about it a little bit more here. Again, AI transforms nonprofit operations, enables data-driven decisions and personalized strategies. I mean, you can pull a lot of information through AI, sort that data and everything else. Generative AI adds content creation for newsletters, social media, fundraising, all the things we've already talked about. We're seeing an uptick in utilizing chatbots to enhance customer service and enhance customer communication, which is freeing up staff for complex tasks. So some of the key stats here in terms of AI, the global AI market is valued at over $136 billion. Almost 117 million people in the US will use generative AI by 2024. 48% of businesses use some form of AI to utilize big data effectively. 83% of companies claim that AI is a top priority in their business plans. 89% of nonprofits agree that AI will improve efficiency, but only 28% say they currently use it. So again, there's this disconnect that's happening in the nonprofit sector. We need to kind of close that gap. 25% of companies have adopted AI to address labor shortages. As I said before, as we are using AI more and more, it's going to create, again, a little bit more in terms of that unemployment level. By 2030, 30% of work hours across the United States economy could be automated with AI. That's a huge amount. And about 50% of nonprofit activities, not jobs, can be automated using AI, leading to more efficient and productive organizations. So there's a lot of ways that nonprofit organizations can utilize AI. So again, it's something that we're expecting in 2024 and beyond to see kind of an upward tick in. If you are utilizing AI a lot, just please, please, please make sure that you are starting to put in place, or you have in place, AI usage policies. AI is very complex. AI relies upon information. Where's that information coming from? To what extent are you using closed cycle AI or open? Open is going to be going into the open marketplace to pull information. Closed is where you're inputting the data, and that data is secured and safe. You just got to be careful that you're not throwing your data out there into the marketplace that you don't want to necessarily do. So you have to make sure that you're safe with all of that stuff. You got to consider ethical guidelines. You got to consider data governance, making sure that you got proper protocols for responsible data handling. Again, making sure that you are concerned about privacy and everything else. There's a need for discussion within your policy about training and education. What sort of ongoing training is going to take place? How do you enhance staff AI literacy and adapt to some of these new technological advancements? You need to do regular audits and assessment of your AI to make sure, or of your AI policies to make sure that everything is going the way you expect it to go. Again, that you're not somehow inadvertently allowing confidential information out. We give you a link here that Roundtable Technology, one of the nonprofit resource hub partners, they provided a sample AI usage policy. So you can kind of click here and get a copy of an AI usage policy. Moving on to some of the HR trends that are out there. Again, another one of the big areas that we're seeing out there. So, when we kind of look at what's going on out there from an HR perspective, we still are seeing a tight labor market. Again, that we do expect some of that to loosen up through 2024 as we talked about, unemployment starts to increase. What we're seeing from some of the trends that are out there is, and it's nothing new. Employees want more convenience. They want more flexibility within their their work. They want more remote access. I mean, we're seeing more and more companies are pushing their staff to come back, and employees, they don't mind coming back from a hybrid perspective, but a lot of employees still want to have some of that remote capabilities. So again, I think a lot of it comes down to just kind of making sure that, you have the ability to focus on creating a caring and valued environment. I think you need to address mental health challenges. 38% of nonprofits face, mental health challenges within their staff. Research has showed that employees in good mental health, physical health, and emotional health are more productive than those without health factors. So, things that we're seeing some organizations and companies doing is providing mental health and psychosocial support programs, stress release, and education on how to cope with stress, mental health resources and tapping their staff into mental health resources, financial education, because financial health is also important. We're seeing weight management programs in place. We're seeing the creation of more nurturing, supportive cultures. We're seeing daycare being added into some of the benefit packages that organizations are offering. So all of these things are things that are going to help alleviate some of the stress that's in the marketplace. Link well-being to productivity, promote a culture of well-being with various programs. So all of these things are things that we need to do in terms of kind of putting employees' well-being first. People want that work-life balance. We do need to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, something we've talked about several times today. Organizations need to be reflective of the communities that they serve. They need to have different perspectives, which only comes from, people with diverse backgrounds. So it is something that has been a primary focus over the last couple of years, and it's going to continue to be a primary focus into 2024. There's going to continue to be a high demand for diverse talent, that should say in 2024. And consider a lot of organizations have started putting in place chief diversity officers. So at least some of the larger organizations have started to do that in order to ensure that DEI is an important facet within the organization. You need to measure and improve talent experiences and improve salary transparency. That has to happen now under pay parity rules that went into effect, like I said, in September. So nonprofit job categories that are out there with vacancies. Program and service delivery is still the biggest issue. Organizations can't find people to provide that service delivery. Entry-level staff is second, administrative and HR, development and fundraising, senior management, and then finally communication. From a compensation perspective, PMP Staffing Group does an annual nonprofit salary and staffing trends report, something that we provided you with a link for. We do recommend that you go take a look at it and consider downloading it. 91% of nonprofits reported having to increase salaries again in 2023. 35% described that the organization could not meet the expected salary demands of top talent. And that's tough, because if you can't meet the salary demands of top talent, you're going to lose them. So I'm not going to go through these charts here, but just know they're here. Take a look at this salary study. It's a really good salary study. Employee retention, as of 2022, the average turnover for nonprofit organizations was approximately 19%. Whereas the average for all industry turnover was about 12%. So nonprofit turnover is worse than what we're seeing in the rest of the industry. Again, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, from a wage perspective, there's an issue there. You need to create career paths tailored to each employee's professional goal. The people want to know if there's upward mobility. And if there isn't upward mobility, people aren't necessarily going to stay. Among workers who left nonprofit jobs in 2021, and again, I know some of this information is a little bit old, but that's the only information that's available. 44% of them said that they left because the organization didn't offer enough opportunities for career growth. What are you doing in terms of sitting down with your staff, talking about what that growth potential for them is? What's their next step? Where is their career going? I don't know how often you guys do reviews. We do reviews twice a year here within our accounting firm. And that's something that always gets discussed at least once a year, in terms of what's the next growth level for them? What do they need to do to get there? How can we help? And what are the growth factors that they need to work on? 38% of young nonprofit professionals think they'll need to move organizations for promotion. So you've got good young talent, and you're not keeping it because you're not doing a good enough job of communicating with people in terms of what they need to do in order to build and grow and move. You need to be transparent with employees about the organizational goals, policies, decisions, budgets, things like that, so that they really have a good understanding. Remember, your staff are making an investment in your organization. And in order for them to make an intelligent investment in your organization, they really need to understand the direction your organization is moving in. If they're going to invest their time, energy, and ability into your organization, they need to make sure that that investment is going to pay dividends down the road. So if they don't understand what their growth potential is, then they're in a situation where, why should they stay? So it's really, really important that there's a discussion about career path and growth patterns and everything else for your staff. Get feedback, find out from the employees. What are they looking for? What are you doing well? What are you not doing well? I don't know how many organizations do 360 reviews, but I think 360 reviews are super important. It gives you an opportunity to not just, provide a top-down approach to your reviews, but it also provides a bottom-up, because the 360 review allows your staff to review their management team. And you get a good understanding of, what the staff think of their supervisors on an anonymous basis. And you can use that feedback to kind of help grow your supervisors and your leadership team. You want to find ways to maximize benefits. You want to find ways to find new benefits that organizations can provide to keep people connected to your organization. Promote a healthy work culture. We talked about healthy work culture. We talked about that already in terms of the creating a healthy work environment for your staff. Promote work-life balance. That's something that staff are clearly looking for. We talked about unique career paths for employees and letting them know what their career paths look like. And employers want, managers and senior managers to be involved in the process. You want your management and your senior management team to be connected to your staff. The days of employees being connected to an organization are over. Employees are more connected to leadership than they are to an organization. So you really want to make sure that your leadership team is and stays connected to your staff. From understanding your workforce, we talked about the different generations. Generation Z, which is your 1997 and onward, is they value in-person interaction. They're looking for feedback on a frequent basis. They're accustomed to change, and they expect change to happen within the workforce and within the workplace. So if you're kind of a static work environment, it's going to be hard for you to keep your Gen Z employees. Millennials between 77 and 97 by 2025 will comprise about 75% of the global workforce. Looking to be coached or mentored, prefer collaborative technology-centric training. Their alignment with company values is key. So they want to understand what your company values are, and they want to be able to align with them. That's usually favorable for nonprofit organizations. Gen X, they embrace a hands-off management policy. They believe in entrepreneurial spirits. They're result-oriented. They view change as valuable for opportunity. And then boomers, this is the generation that's kind of on their way out for most organizations. More reserved in communication style. They value traditional instructor-led courses or self-learning tools, which is not how the other generations necessarily learn. And they want to manage as ethical, fair, and consistent. The younger generations want managers who are going to be communicative. They want a management team that's going to show empathy. They want ongoing training. And they want to be able to connect with their managers. So again, we're looking at a situation where there's some kind of disconnect in terms of some of the generations. And if you've got that disconnect, and like I said, you take a Gen Z individual and you put that Gen Z worker in a baby boomer management style, it's not going to last, because you've got a different mindset. So you really need to make sure that you're going out there and retooling your staff, so that you're retooling your leadership team, so that you've got alignment of mindset. In terms of a couple last things that I want to go over. So we do have the nonprofit trends report. You can click on this and get a copy of it. I know it's been posted in the chat. So please take a copy and read through the report. There's a lot of good information. There's a lot of insight from some amazing leaders within the nonprofit sector, as well as a lot of the members of the Nonprofit Resource Hub. I'll just bring that up really quick here. For those of you who don't know what the Nonprofit Resource Hub is, the Nonprofit Resource Hub is our partner with respect to this trend report. The Nonprofit Resource Hub is an organization, nonprofit organization that's geared towards having a one-stop place for you to get information that's impacting the nonprofit sector. The Resource Hub does a lot of trainings and webinars and everything else to get you information. So it's free membership to all nonprofit organizations. There's a group of service providers within the Nonprofit Resource Hub that work closely with the nonprofit sector, and they're donating their time in terms of putting information out there so that the nonprofit sector is well informed. So it's really a good place to go and get information in a really quick way and have access to some of the really strong vendors and resources within the sector. So we just posted in the chat the link to the Nonprofit Resource Hub. In addition, back in October, we issued a nonprofit fundraising guide. That fundraising guide does focus on some of the changes we're seeing in the fundraising world, some kind of innovative ideas and thought processing within fundraising. I was talking about the Nonprofit Resource Hub. This is the amazing group of members. Again, if you're not already a member of the Nonprofit Resource Hub, consider joining. And that's me with my big ears. So I thank everybody for participating. I'll stick around for another minute or two if anybody has any questions. Anyway, thanks again for everybody for participating. And we really, really, really appreciate this. It's you guys who are really making a difference in the world. And, you know, for us to be able to give you some insight, that's great from our perspective. So thanks again, everyone.